New businesses traditionally go through tough times in the first few years. Now, conventional wisdom says that you shouldn't enter fiercely competitive marketplaces because you may not survive. Now, some research at Cranfield throws new light on this. Now, in the studio today are people that have carried out the research, Professor Andrew Burke and Dr. Stephanie Hussels. Now, Andrew, let's look at this research. Is it true, this conventional wisdom that says don't go into these fierce markets?
Yes, it's certainly true that highly competitive markets are a tough environment for any business, whether an established business or a new business. But there are also some benefits, and I think the essence of our research is really drawing out that those benefits are bigger than previously supposed. One of the benefits is really in relation to a conditioning effect, in that if a business develops in a highly competitive market, it becomes very market focused in terms of connecting with customers, in terms of generating cash and so on. And the reason it has to be focused in that manner is because its survival hinges on it. The other aspect that can also be beneficial for a new entrant is in relation to the incumbents. Is the fact that there is a competitive market there means that there are more weaker firms to actually to pick off. So there are some easy targets that new entrants can tackle. And so what our research is looking at is how these beneficial effects trade off with the traditional negative effects of a tough competitive environment.
So Stephanie, give me some insights into how this research was carried out and a bit more about what came out of it.
I mean, we looked at cohorts of UK industry data over the year 1995 to 2004. And in particular, we were interested, as Andrew mentioned, in cohorts that started in a crowded market or a more competitive space then versus those that started in a less crowded, less competitive market. In contrasting to existing studies, we not only looked at survival rates, which were cumulative, but we looked at them on a year-on-year basis, so from year 0 to year 1 to year 2, and 2 to year 3. And this allowed us really to test the impact the environment has on business survival on an annual basis. What we found was interesting. In year 1, it showed that firms that started in a tougher or more competitive landscape environment had a lower survival rate. But surprisingly, and I think that's the real fascinating part of the research, after 3 years that turned around, and those businesses that started in a tougher environment and then moved to an easier environment had the highest business survival rate, and the gap was actually 17%.
This is interesting. Andrew, let's explore this a bit more. Let's pick out the implications and lessons from this.
Well, we think 3 things are going on here. In the first level, we think there's likely to be a selection effect, is that if the market environment is very tough, then any rational entrepreneur is going to weigh that up, and hence you'll get a better quality of business starting in a tough environment. So that's one effect. In addition to that, we've got the weak incumbent effect, is that in a competitive environment, the firms are weakened by the relentless competition, and that can make a good target for new entrants to enter and push a firm out or capture some market space. But the interesting aspect we think is the third influence, which is a conditioning effect, and this operates a bit like vaccination, is that there's an immunization effect. So, borrowing a metaphor from the medical science, I think people were abhorred and resistant to the idea that you actually expose a person to a disease in order to protect them from it. But in effect, I think in business, the conditioning effect operates like this. So on one hand, exposing a business to competition in its early days has negative effects, a bit like the inflammatory effect from medicine. But it also has a second effect, which really is the immunization effect. So in other words, the business response to that competitive environment becomes much more efficiency driven, much more innovation driven in terms of capturing market space and so on. And these cultural effects can affect the DNA of the organization, which can have long lasting effects.
So competitive immunisation is clearly good news for businesses. Say some more about the lessons.
Well, the general lesson is that if a business is exposed to safe levels of competition, that this can be a good thing for the organisation for the long term. So there's a number of lessons that stem from this. The first thing is that any executive should use a tough business environment for their advantage. So introduce changes, make the organisation more efficient, and the tough competitive environment will make it easier to do that and actually to generate a long-term competitive culture within the organisation. The other aspect is also to try to mimic a tough competitive environment. There's two ways in which a business typically can do this. One is in terms of creating a competitive environment within the organisation. So, for example, benchmarking performance of the organisation against other firms, even though they might not be in direct competition, or benchmarking the performance of teams and units within the organisation. So get that competitive environment moving. And the third lesson is never to overfund a venture. In weak competitive environments, businesses can detach from the market realities. In highly competitive markets, they need to stay focused and generate cash. So one of the key things here is that it might actually be a good idea to slightly underfund a venture to actually keep it market focused and to keep that competitive pressure.
Some interesting new ideas and new thoughts. Thank you very much, Andrew and Stephanie.
Thank you.